Today's video is going to be a little bit different, or a lot different actually. So there's no gameplay. I've gotten a lot of requests for budget free-to-play friendly decks, so I decided to brew up 4 budget lists that have no epics or legendaries or mythics, with the exception of Portal, which is the land that we had an event for, and if you don't have that, I have other suggestions. So my thought process on how to make these budget decks is, even if I don't have the best tools that I could have, the idea is I want to make sure I have a good game plan against the main archetypes in card games. So aggro, mid-range, control, those are the big 3. Obviously you have like tempo and combo, but those aren't so much of a thing in this game, at least not yet. There's a few combo decks, but you wouldn't play too differently anyway. So with that in mind, I put in Runeshell Crab in this deck because it just halts early aggression very well. Being a 3/3, you most likely are going to get multiple trades, or they're just not going to swing in early on you until they have something that can trade with this. And since you don't have as many powerful cards, the game is likely going to take you longer to win, so you need to make sure you can get to that point. So we run the 2 get-aheads because it's in every Ashiok list, the 2 extract fears, every Ashiok list. Neurobot is in every Ashiok list almost. Lorekeeper is basically in every Ashiok list. So already there's a ton of similarity between this and a full version. Counterfeiter, something that not all the lists run, but it's another way to generate nightmares and to get in a little bit more damage. I have the Drain Blood just because, again, you don't have such powerful cards, so you might need to stabilize a little bit earlier, have a little bit more removal, have a little bit more heal. This kind of covers all those bases. Merchant of Death, since you don't have like something like Scour the Void's an epic, but you might not have access to that, and you need to draw some more cards, so Merchant is just fine as a blocker and can get you some more draws. Infectious Scorpion is a fantastic way of controlling the board a little bit slower, but giving you nightmares, what you want. Shadowmage Saboteur is just a good card early, and then can actually help you get nightmares into your opponent's deck, even if you don't have that many nightmare generators. We run the Shell Game because you basically have to. This deck doesn't have a lot of good ways of dealing with tall strategies, or maybe something with like Relentless. So if you're going against Liliana, or the new creature that's in like every Vraska deck that never loses, Relentless is a very key card. So against Liliana and Vraska, you definitely keep these in your opening hand. Jolt of Inspiration is one of your only ways of generating a good amount of card value without any epics, legendaries, or mythics. So this card's super important. If you know you're going to have time against, like, say, Control, you can just put back a lot of other things and just search for cards like this that will actually generate you some value, because time just isn't that, you're not under that much pressure for time. Against aggro, against mid-range, Infest is a fantastic tool to help you stabilize, and I run it in pretty much every Ashiok deck that I make. It's very strong and no one plays around it. And then this isn't something that's in every Ashiok deck. I run it sometimes, but again, since it's a budget list, Flagrant Foul is just another way of getting rid of problems. And then we have the Shadow Stag, which on debut reduces the cost of every card in your hand that didn't start there by 1. So, and then we're running the Fountain of Magic. So starting in turn 6, you have a chance to add a spell that costs 6 or less to your hand instead of getting a mana gem. So this is another way of just generating like passive value. Sometimes I like running Old Graveyard over it, because in Ashiok sometimes you have a problem with having bodies on the board, and that covers it. But Old Graveyard is epic, and I wanted to keep it as budget as possible. But if you do have Old Graveyard, I would suggest trying that out over the Fountain of Magic. I like it more. It feels a little bit more powerful to me. So that's the first deck. Alright, the second deck I have is a Vraska list. So this is one of the lists that I have the Yawning Portal in. It's just a way to get more, basically to have more threat density in grindy games against Control and against mid-range. If you don't have this, again, I would suggest playing Old Graveyard as just another way to continue to get creatures, so you can keep applying pressure in games that are going late and that are grindy. So Vraska's Throne is a fantastic card. It needs to go in basically every Vraska list. So this is, you'd be surprised how often you find your win con off of this, and then how often it helps you filter through your deck. So this is absolutely necessary. Vraska's Grub is really strong for helping you get to more powerful turns a lot sooner than you should, and it's also just a good blocker early, so it's good against aggression. Merchant of Death, if you kill it on your turn via your Throne, Sinister Southpaw, Grotesque, things like that, you'll draw twice. And so, especially in a budget list, it's not that this isn't in every Vraska list anyway, but he's going to be even more important because you need to have more ways of getting through your deck. Scorpion is a fantastic way of dealing with things on the board, and giving you 2 Fatal Infections on your turn is very strong and will save you a lot when there's boards that you basically shouldn't be able to break. We're running the Tusker because it is just a good stat stick, and so it'll help you against mid-range and aggro, and when you go aggressive against control, it's statted very well, so it's not easy to deal with. So this card is honestly one of my favorite cards in the game, even though it's extremely simple. It is very powerful. Giant Growth is a way of maybe dealing with things that you would be able to deal with otherwise, but since this is a budget list, it gives you basically outs when you normally would not have one, and your opponent might not be expecting it, right? So why not? The Bone Club Shambler is just a way of obviously getting some more stats on things. If you do it on your turn, it's +2/+2, and it's already well statted for a 2-drop, so it's good against aggro, mid-range, and control. Just gives them a lot of problems. And then we have the Recycled Grotesque. So this is a way to make sure your finale triggers happen on your turn when you want them to. And so you can get the 2 draws, you can get the 2 Fatal Infections, you can gain 6 life instead of 3 with Soul of the Wood, you can gain more empty mana gems with Vraska's Grub, and so on. So, and it's also really big. So if your opponent's trying to get in your face, they have to get through him, which is a problem. And that's the same kind of premise behind the Rotting Baboon. It's a common, everyone probably has 2 of these, and if you don't, you can craft it very easily. And it's just a roadblock for aggro and mid-range. And again, against control, it's not easy for them to deal with because of how he's statted. So like a curve of like Tusker into Baboon is a problem for a lot of decks. And then Soul of the Wood, so we don't have as many tools as we normally would. So having reach and healing yourself for 3 is strong, and it's evenly statted for its cost. And then also, if you need to get out of like burn range, if you're versing like a Chandra or a Domri, or maybe you want to get out of like second sun range if you're going against control, you can kill this on your turn and gain 6 health, which is not inconsequential. It comes up a lot. And then you have the Flagrant Foul, just destroys any creature. And then we have the Gluttonous Goo. So debut gets +2/+2 and ward if a creature died this turn. You can almost ensure that this happens in this deck. And so it's just another threat for your opponent to deal with. And the fact that it gets ward means control can't just instantly remove it unless they Day of Judgment or not even Lava Wave, because it'll be too big. So it's just a good way to pressure your opponent, and it's low rarity, right? And then we have Sinister Southpaw as another way of triggering all your finale effects on your turn and destroys a problem card from the opponent. And then Turn to Stone is one of the best cards in the game, in my opinion. So transform an enemy creature into a statue, and then you gain control of the statue. So you can deal with a lot of problems in a unique way, much like Shell Game, but then you also get a 2/2 blocker. So you can almost deal with 2 things, or deal with a thing and then have a chump blocker for the other threat that maybe you didn't have enough mana to answer that turn. And then as another way of finishing the game, besides your mid-range threats and Portal giving you threats and Throne giving you threats, you can play Crush of Worms, which on debut summons 2 copies of itself. So you can just build a board for no reason, and if you read they don't have their Day of Judgment, their Lava Wave, or if they've already played it, this can be a really big problem for the opponent. And the reason, I forgot to mention this in the Ashiok video, the reason I've chosen Ashiok and Vraska is because their strategies are almost evergreen. So Ashiok's strategy is built in. it's a passive win con that's just always going to be there. So it doesn't matter the exact cards that you have. You can just use the best cards you have available, and Ashiok will have a really good chance of just getting you through the game. And same thing with Vraska, where it's basically just whatever mid-range threats you happen to pull that are good, and then she's got cards like Turn to Stone that are just really powerful in any meta. So they have these evergreen strategies that are very, very flexible, and you don't need specific cards to make them happen. So that's the second deck. Alright, so the third budget deck is Kiora, and I chose Kiora pretty much for the same reasons, because her strategy is evergreen, and her benefit is, so when you get to 10, 15, 20 mana, you get these Leviathans that are powerful. So you don't have to have pulled like the best creatures in the game. You know you're getting these creatures when you play Kiora, and so there's something really safe about that. So we run the crab for the same reason the Ashiok deck. It really shuts down aggro, and also with Kiora you get that 0/1 fish. So on turn 1 you drop a 0/1 fish, you have the 0/1 fish and you drop the crab. It's really hard for your opponent to get through that if they're aggression or any kind of aggressive deck, so aggro or mid-range. So if you see this in your opening hand against aggro or mid-range, you just keep it, and it will stop them in their tracks for a couple of turns, most likely. We have the Giant Growth for the same reasons as we did in the Vraska list, because it just helps you get out of situations you wouldn't normally be able to. It helps your board persist and just gives your opponent a harder time of breaking through before you get to the later points in the game. And then we have the Grudge Match, so it's just a little bit more removal, and it's just, frankly, it's just annoying for the opponent. Kiora's Tide Shaper is one of the best cards in the game. 3-drop 2/2 debut, gain an empty mana gem. So we want to be ramping, and ramping while dropping a body is just fantastic. Mage of Insight, so if you're running a budget list, you're not running the artifact package with like Scepter and Harmonican and things like that, and Master Possibilities to generate card advantage. So we have to have some way of getting through our deck, so that's why I chose Mage of Insight, just a body that draws a card. Shell Game, we already know why we're running this, to deal with relentless creatures, deal with threats that we otherwise wouldn't be able to, and in this color scheme we don't have that good of ways of dealing with threats. Elvish Explorer, after this fights during your turn, gain an empty mana gem, so it's just a 4-drop 4/4. It's not badly statted, and then if you combine it with the Grudge Match, you can get rid of something, block something else, and then you get to ramp. So there's a good little combo there. Spear Crown Stag is just another way of dealing with wider boards, so you can just hit something with flying that's bothering you. If you're going against aggro or mid-range, you can kill a creature and then block again. So it's just a solid choice for budget. And then Sylvan Shrine, activate, gain an empty mana gem. You can do it twice. It's exactly what we want in this strategy. Drag Under, put an enemy creature into the top 8 cards of your opponent's deck. So it's not the best removal, but again, we don't have a lot of removal in this color scheme, and it's not bad. So I'm assuming that if you're trying to build a bunch of budget lists, that you probably don't have a lot of threats that you would like. You don't have Epitome of Might, most likely. So Octo Pummeler is just a way of having something that is overstated and then can kind of roll potentially if like maybe you haven't blocked with your fish yet. You give your fish +2/+2, or it just generates you a free blocker when it attacks, and it comes with Kiora. So that's why it's in here, just because it's fat, and it's basically free if you have Kiora. And then Brawling Behemoth is just another way of dealing with problematic cards. It has reach to help you if you're versing flyers. Can kill flyers with its fight effect, obviously, and it's not poorly statted, right? And then again, we have the Crush of Worms because we're ramping. So let's say on average we ramp twice, and we drop this on turn 7. It can do significant damage. So that is my Kiora list. If you don't have the portal, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but if you don't have the portal, I would just play probably like Fountain of Magic, just something so that way when the game's going long, you have a way of generating some sort of card advantage, because Kiora can have a hard time with that if your deck isn't slammed full of epics and legendaries. So that's deck number 3. Alright, and you guys probably saw this coming. My last deck is, of course, Chandra, because the first season, I climbed really high in Mythic with her, and it was pretty easy. Like, she felt pretty overpowered, to be honest. And this season, as soon as they nerfed Dritz, she got me like 120 places up in Mythic, and that version of the deck only has 4 cards different from this one. So if you're looking to, it's particularly a good ladder deck because the games are so short. So you can just get in a lot more reps and climb a lot faster with Chandra versus something like the Ashiok, the Kiora, the Vraska. And that's why I wanted to include it as just a faster laddering option, and also for people that just like to go face and, blockers, or for math is for blockers, right? So we have the Pouncing Lemur just because it's a 1-drop 3/2. It doesn't matter that it can't block, you're going to kill them faster. Raging Goblin, 1-drop 2/1 haste. It's in every Chandra list, basically. Overgrown Iguana, 4/2 with trample. See where it's going. Give a friendly creature +2/0. The combat tricks are good. Says a creature can't block. So if they spend their turn on, like, say you're versing like an Ashiok and they summon a stag for the turn and they pass back to you, then they're gonna like die, basically. Tusker again, because I chose green because it's just a way of basically making the deck not so squishy. So if you're new to card games, the basic principle of aggro is you lower your threat density so you can go under the opponent's strategy and kill them quickly. Mid-range decks sacrifice speed for threat density so they can not be as much of a glass cannon. So the green in this deck takes Chandra from being a glass cannon and gives it some of that stickiness that mid-range has while still being very fast. And that's why I like green, because it gives you that fast and powerful feel. And this is just the personification of that. It's just a 2-drop 4/3 that's just hard to deal with. And that's why it's one of my favorite cards. Giant Growth, it's the same reasoning as in all the other lists, just in here if you put it on something with trample, or they're really hoping that it's going to get removed, like if they fight it and it doesn't, that can be backbreaking for the opponent. So this is Ball Lightning in the list that I use, but since it's a budget list, I thought this was a good substitution because it's just reach, but in a different way. So debut, if your opponent has more cards in hand, deal damage to them equal to the difference. So if you're versing control and they're not ready for this can do like 5+ damage, like very easily. If you're going up against like a Ashiok list and they just drew 2 cards and they drafted one with Throne and they already had like 3 cards in hand and they pass to you and you drop this, they're getting hurt. So I've actually tested this out a few times. I like Ball Lightning more, but this card is like decent. Blitzing Minotaur, 3-drop 3/3 with haste. It's pretty self-explanatory. Chandra's Firecrafter is a 3-drop 3/3. Debut, add a random red spell or trap that deals damage to your hand, so the value you can get off of this is crazy and can just change games for no reason. Flame Shot is your way of breaking boards and getting your damage through and getting the last bit of damage to their face. And Vicious Mongrel is the other reason why I run green, because having a 4-drop 4/5 is going to take out more than one thing with it. And so you're trying to you don't generate card advantage by like divination, which is just a straight +1. You're generating card advantage by making your opponent have to trade multiple times, and you basically wear them down. And this is a really good card at doing that. And also, if you go second and you have the Fragile Mana Gem and you drop this on turn 3, I swear I don't know what the math is because I haven't tracked it. But I swear to you, when I go second and I drop this on turn 3, I swear I win like an absurd percentage of the time. It's really strong. And then for the same reasons that I just mentioned, I'm choosing this as my replacement for Hellrider, because I like the curve of the other deck, so I wanted to find another 5-drop. And having a 5-drop that just fights a random enemy creature, yeah, random isn't that good sometimes, but most of the time their board's already going to be small because they're desperately blocking you and you're removing their stuff with like Flame Shot and whatnot. So it's going to be like a 50-50 between the thing that you want, or it's just going to straight take out the thing that you want to take out. And again, that's another 2-for-1 on a body. So it's going to be there afterwards most likely, and they still have to deal with it either by blocking it or removing it, and that's exactly what you want in this type of deck. You need them to waste time while they're dying. And then we have the Lava Axe, deal 5 to your opponent. So I've stolen, I don't even know how many games with this card. Basically between her ability and Lava Axe, they start with 9 less life. And it's just a good feeling for you, not for them. And then 5-drop 6/6 Fire Spout Elemental. Haste at the start of your turn, deal 2 damage to yourself, which really doesn't matter 99.9% of the time. It's just a 5-drop 6/6 that your opponent has to dump a bunch of resources into to kill, or take a whole turn to shell game it, flagrant foul, turn to stone, whatever. And then you're just continuing to go face, and if they don't answer it, they're going to die. And then the land is super important because I'll never play another land that's not this with Chandra, because when it pings stuff for 1, it sets up fantastic flame shot turns. Like, let's say they're at 6 health and you have a lava axe in hand, you can play to those type of outs where it's like, okay, maybe I can just get my opponent to like 6 or 7 and then just bank on the volcano hitting them and then lava axing them for gain. Stuff like that comes up all the time, and blocking in such a way that your opponent only has 1 defense left on their creatures, and knowing that if your active volcano goes off, you're going to win the game, is just really strong. So you have to pay attention to that and make sure that you're trying to set up boards in that way. And active volcano feels very strong and pretty unfair sometimes, because it just gets rid of stuff in your way for no reason. So that's the Chandra list. Those are the 4 budget decks. If you want to know what I would do to change them to make them stronger, all of these decks I have played on my channel fairly recently, and just take a look at those and see what changes that I've made. I'm not going to put all the deck lists in the description, because I'll have just an enormous description and it'll look really stupid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to timestamp each one of these budget deck lists. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you tomorrow.